The house on the corner hadn't breathed in years. But when Eminem opened the door, the dust moved like it recognized him. The mirror at the end of the hall flickered as if it had been waiting. Detroit's winter light came in thin and grey, the kind that doesn't warm anything, just points at what's left. Boards over the windows threw stripes across the floor. Wallpaper bubbled and peeled. Flowers shriveled into paper fossils. He stood in the doorway and let the cold roll up his sleeves. It smelled like wet wood, insulation. Old cigarettes, like someone had tried to live here and changed their mind halfway through a breath. He hadn't meant to come alone. People don't get it. Sometimes the crowd makes you feel lonelier. He'd told no one, driven streets he knew by muscle and ghost, turned where the city used to, counted the beats of potholes he'd memorized before he had a reason to memorize anything else. The keys had been mailed in an envelope without a note, just a return address he didn't recognize and a name that made his neck heat. To the one who left, he'd come because the words felt like a dare. He crossed the living room, shoes, making polite apologies to the floor. The air had that cold that knows your bones. A toppled bookshelf leaned against a wall whose paint remembered a different color under the current one. In the corner, a coat hook hung with nothing on it, like an open hand. The quiet wasn't quiet so much as layered. Outside wind, inside house. And beneath both a small mechanical hum he couldn't place, sold refrigerator. Space heater someone forgot. He followed it down the hall. At the end was a door warped by years, swollen at the bottom, a little off the hinges. He pressed, it gave. The hum grew into a low, persistent note. Not electrical, not alive, an in-between sound. The room had been a bedroom once. Now it held a mattress spring, a plastic crate, a bow-legged dresser, a rectangle of darker paint where a picture used to be. In that rectangle, an absence remained, stubborn and exact. And in that absence, the glass of a mirror caught. Just enough light to be a shape instead of a surface. He stepped closer. The mirror was tall and thin, framed in cheap gilt that had peeled to brown at the corners. Where it met the wallpaper had been cut clean, as if someone had installed the mirror later. Careful not to damage anything, careful enough to worry him. His reflection stood in it with him hood up, chin peppered with cold eyes that looked like they'd slept but dreamed too loud. He lifted a hand. The reflection lifted, half a beat after half a beat. He froze that small detail in the part of his mind that keeps score. He moved left. The reflection lagged again, a fraction slower than a joke. He moved right. It caught up late, like a dancer who knows the steps, but not the song. Breath clouded the glass in a faint oval. The oval disappeared before his next exhale met it. He reached behind the dresser and dragged it an inch. Then two, then enough to scratch a crescent into the floor that could never be unmade. The mirror wasn't hung. It was sunk into the wall. Flush edges, sealed with a thin bead of something that looked like clear glue fossilized to amber. He tapped the glass with a knuckle. The sound came back a little wrong, deeper than it should have been, like knocking on a lid with space under it. He stared at himself and remembered being a kid in a different mirror, telling the face there he'd get out, and that face telling him nothing back, because that's how mirrors work. They copy, they don't help. The hum receded. He felt his pulse more. He took off his gloves, rubbed his fingertips down the cold frame, found a notch under the right corner, like a fingernail had lived there once. He hooked it and pulled. The mirror did not budge. He leaned his weight in and pulled again. Something inside the wall answered soft, a click. as if a latch decided to consider him. In the glass, his reflection didn't lean the same amount. It leaned less, then more, then caught him exactly, and that was worse than the lag, because it meant the mirror could choose when to be precise. He looked away, and the room shifted back into a regular room. He looked at the mirror, and his stomach did the quiet flip it does when a plane drops 3 inches too fast. He wanted to leave. He wanted to know. Those two desires are brothers that never sit at the same table. Okay, he said, out loud. To nobody, the sound of his voice making the air warmer by the smallest fraction. Okay? He took the plastic crate, turned it upside down, stood on it to get his shoulders above the frame. Dust snowed his hoodie. He wedged his fingers along the top and pulled again, and this time the frame bowed a hair and a faint seam. Opened along the left side. He thought of prying at old cassettes to fix tape that had folded over on itself. How sometimes it worked and sometimes it made the song worse. He didn't stop. The seam widened. The mirror shivered under his hands. He held on, thinking absurdly that if it fell, it would fall forward and swallow him. He pushed it back against the wall with his hips and felt the thing behind it. A hinge, old but oiled, a weight pivoting smooth. He climbed down, hands cold and sticky with aged adhesive. He got his shoulder under the right edge and urged the thing outward. It swung like a door. Behind it, not insulation, not studs, another surface. Another mirror. No, not mirror. Glass with space behind it. A box built into the wall, narrow and deep. Lined in the same peeling wallpaper, but cleaner, like the inside had been spared the house's slow ruin. On the back wall, a second pane of glass. His reflection multiplied, him, in him, in him. But the second reflection wasn't true. In the far glass, the hoodie he wore was a different color, darker, cuffs shredded from a habit he doesn't have anymore. The him in the far pane had a scar he'd earned in a fight he never fought. The breath in the far pane did not fog, even when he breathed hard enough to test it. He swallowed and leaned closer to the first glass. The far him leaned too, but not at his pace. It drifted forward like a fish, considering a finger on the tank. Their noses nearly touched the two surfaces. His skin prickled. A hair at the back of his neck lifted like a question. He raised his right hand. In the near glass, the right hand rose. In the far glass, a left hand rose instead. He dropped his arm. In the far pane, the other him kept it up 1 second longer, palm open, like a stop sign. He said, "What is this?" The house did not answer. The other did. Not with sound, his mouth stayed closed, but with movement so exact it felt like hearing. The far version tapped its wrist where a watch might be, then pointed down the hall behind him, then back to the glass. Come and go and come back, the gesture seemed to say. Or maybe it meant hurry up. Or maybe it meant you're late and have always been late. He closed his eyes and listened to the old hum again, but the hum was gone. It was just his heart and the weather. He opened his eyes. The other him looked older suddenly, not in face, but in gravity. It mouthed a word he could have read in a different life. Please. Air thinned. The room pressed. He stepped off the crate and walked back down the hall to the front door, because leaving is sometimes the only way to measure what wants you to stay. He put his hand on the knob and looked over his shoulder. In the living room windows, dusty. Reflection, he saw the hall, his own back, and that bedroom door. In that smaller reflection, the mirror door inside the wall was wider open than he'd left it. He hadn't left it open at all. He turned. Footsteps faster, palms sweating inside. cold air, shoulders tight. He reached the room and found the heavy thing swung out to its full angle, its hinge silent as guilt. The glass inside gleamed with flat winter light. Beyond it, the second pane showed not him now, but him then. A kid with a buzz cut and a t-shirt. That wasn't his size, standing in this same room with a different carpet. Behind that kid, a woman crushed a cigarette into a chipped saucer and looked at the ceiling like God had made a mistake. He took a breath he didn't know he still knew how to take. The kid in the far glass didn't. The kid looked up and mouthed something that could have been a name or a warning or just the first sound a person makes when finally someone looks back. He put his fingers against the near pane. The cold bit and didn't release. He pressed harder until his knuckles blanched. On the other side, the kid raised his left hand, the wrong hand, mirror hand, and did the same. The pane between them gathered their prints in faint fogs that almost overlapped. The hallway groaned under a weight that wasn't his. He kept his hand there, eyes still on the kid, refusing to check the door even as the floorboard 2 steps behind sang the exact note it used to when anyone came looking. He said, "Not now," to whatever his past had sent. He said, "Not yet," to whatever his future wanted. He said nothing to the mirror, because the mirror was listening too hard. The kid's face in the far glass changed. It wasn't fear and it wasn't joy. It was recognition, the kind that hurts more than either. The room in the far pane darkened slightly, like a cloud had passed in that world only. A movement swam at the edge of that deeper reflection. Him, older than the kid, younger than this, walking into frame with a fury he had worn like a jacket once. That version reached for the kid's shoulder. He finally turned to look at the door. Behind him, no one stood there. He looked back at the glass. In the far pane, the older version's hand had already landed. The kid flinched, then steadied, then looked past that hand, past that room, directly into Marshall's eyes, through 2 sheets of glass and an ache of years. The kid mouthed a word again. This time, even without sound, Marshall understood it. Stay. The crate clicked under his weight as he climbed back up. The near pane felt colder, then warmer, then neither, as if it had decided to be skin instead of glass. He leaned in until his breath made its own small cloud. He whispered, "I'm here." The reflection smiled late. The room behind him didn't breathe. The house listened. From somewhere deep inside the wall, something small turned like a key, finding the teeth it was born to meet. The near pane trembled against his fingertips. He didn't pull away. He was done leaving. He was done being written. If the mirror wanted a conversation, it had found his mouth. The second pane brightened. The other versions gathered, as if the glass had turned into a window of a crowded night. They were all him and not him, and somewhere among them a face he had not yet worn waited its turn. The cold began to fade. The glass DIDN single quote, he said, "Tell me." The house answered with a thin, steady click that did not stop. The mirror doors opened the rest of the way, quietly, like a secret that had rehearsed. The second pane quivered faintly, as if something behind it shifted its weight. Marshall stood on the crate, breathing hard, trying to steady himself against the strange rhythm of the house. Dust still floated in lazy spirals, but the air felt tighter now, like the walls had moved closer. He pressed his palm against the cold surface, the glass biting into his skin, and stared at the versions that gathered beyond. Some faces were sharp, crueler than his own, with eyes that carried storms. Some looked broken, softer, like voices that never made it out of their throats. A few smiled with a kind of ease he didn't recognize. Men who seemed to have found peace by taking roads he never dared to step onto. Every one of them was him. Every one was not. The kid he'd seen before pushed forward again, shoving through the swarm of versions like a swimmer breaking to the surface. His young face was pale, jaw set, mouth forming that same word as before. Stay, the plea reached. Through without sound, but landed heavy all the same. Marshall swallowed, throat dry. "What happens if I do?" he whispered. The far glass rippled. A line of words bled across it in faint handwriting that looked like his own. "You don't stay. You replace." He staggered back, boots squealing against the wood of the crate. His stomach dropped. Replace. He looked again. His reflection was alone now. Only him in the near glass. His real hoodie, his real scars. The crowd of versions behind the second pane faded into a smoky blur. But one figure didn't vanish. From the haze stepped a man who looked exactly like him, down to the twitch of his lip and the slope of his shoulders. Same eyes, same stance. The only difference was in the mouth. The other Marshall smiled first. The reflection tilted its head, then moved a beat faster than him. Marshall lifted a hand, testing. The other lifted too, but sooner, sharper, as if it had decided the move. Before he did, the hair at the back of his neck rose. He dropped his arm. The double in the glass kept it raised. Then slowly, deliberately, it tapped the glass with 2 fingers, exactly where his heart was. Marshall stepped down from the crate, pulse hammering. The house groaned above him, beams stretching in the cold. He grabbed his phone, turned the flashlight. On, swept it across the room. No one. Only the mirror and the quiet hum that had returned in the walls. The light caught something on the floor. A folded piece of paper, yellow with age, lay by the edge of the dresser. He bent, picked it up. It was thin, fragile. The ink faded, but the handwriting was his. The loops, the slant, everything. He read the single line scrawled across it. "Not all of us make it out." His skin prickled. He looked back at the mirror. The other Marshall was still there, standing calmly in the second pane, waiting. Behind him, faint shapes of others blurred and bent, faces pressed close but too distorted to read. The hum grew louder. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it free. No call, no text, no notification. Just the black screen lighting on its own. Across it, faint white letters glitched into existence. 2:44 a.m. basement. The screen went black again. Marshall closed his fist around the paper, crumpling it without meaning to. His pulse was in his ears now. He glanced one last time at the mirror. His double in the second pane leaned forward, mouth opening. The sound didn't come through, but the shape of the word was clear enough, soon. The note in his hand crinkled like dry leaves. He stared at it too long, as if the paper itself might confess something. The silence pressed so hard he could hear his own breath scrape in his throat. His phone stayed black, but the words it had shown him, 2:44 a.m., basement burned behind his eyes. He looked at the mirror again. The second glass shimmered faintly, just enough to betray motion beyond it. The other Marshall, the one that looked exactly like him, stood closer now, his face nearly filling the pane. The reflection's lips curled into a slow smile. Marshall's stomach tightened. He forced himself down the hall, boots crunching across dust. The basement door waited at the far end, half open, its handle bent from years of use. Cold air leaked up through the gap. He swallowed and pulled it wider. The stairwell yawned into black. He flicked his phone's flashlight on. The beam cut across cracked steps, broken banisters, water stains. He descended slowly, one hand against the wall, the other clutching the phone. The air grew heavier, damper, full of mold and rust. Each step creaked like the wood was warning him. At the bottom, the basement stretched wider than he remembered. Concrete walls slick with moisture, pipes above dripping slow beats into puddles. In the center sat a folding chair, and above it, chained to the ceiling, another mirror. Its frame was warped metal, edges sharp, surface smeared but alive. The chair was turned toward him. On its seat lay another piece of paper, folded into a neat square. He approached, knees tight, scanning every corner for movement. He picked it up, unfolded it. The same handwriting. His handwriting. Take your place before he does. The mirror above the chair flickered. The beam of his phone wavered. And then, clear as daylight, the reflection in that glass wasn't him standing. Below it was the double upstairs, leaning in, watching through the wrong mirror. Marshall stumbled back. The reflection laughed silently, its chest heaving with the shape of sound. The chains rattled. The glass bulged forward, straining as if something inside pressed hard against it. His phone shook in his grip, the screen flashing white with another. Message, you're already late. He glanced at the time, 2:47. His heart clenched. The glass cracked with a sudden sharp snap. A line ran down the center like a wound. Marshall froze, staring at himself, and not himself, grinning from the other side. The doppelganger raised a mic to its lipser. Mike Marshall didn't hold and began to rap words he could hear in his head but not in the room. His own flow, his own rhythm, twisting around him like a snake. The basement vibrated. Dust fell from the beams. The chains groaned as if ready to tear loose. Marshall dropped the paper. The words still burned into him. Take your place before he does. He stepped forward, directly under the mirror, tilting his head back. The crack widened. His double leaned closer, mouth still spitting verses that weren't written, weren't supposed to exist. The glass bowed. A shard fell, smashing near his foot. The reflection's hand pressed flat against the other side. Marshall reached up, without meaning to, his fingers brushing the cold surface. The double's grin widened. The glass pulsed under his palm. And then the lights in the basement cut out. Darkness pressed down, thick and absolute. Marshall's lungs worked too fast, dragging air that felt damp and used. He held still, listening. Water dripped from the pipes above, like a metronome keeping time for something he couldn't see. His phone buzzed once in his pocket, screen lighting his chin in pale blue. No call, no text, just words scrawling across it on their own. Step in. His pulse lurched. He tilted the beam upward. The chained mirror overhead glowed faintly through the dark, its single crack widening with every second. Behind the glass, the double stood, lips moving, still rapping a verse Marshall could feel pounding in his ribs, but couldn't hear. Each syllable twisted inside his chest, like it was his own breath being stolen and reused. He backed toward the stairs, but the wooden steps behind him groaned and split as if something heavy climbed down, though nothing was there. He whipped the light back around. The folding chair scraped across the floor on its own, metal legs screeching against concrete. It spun to face him. The mirror bulged again. Another shard cracked loose and clattered at his feet. He looked down, the shards. Reflection wasn't of his face looking back, but of the empty chair waiting in the middle of the room. In the shard, the chair wasn't empty. He was already sitting in it. Marshall's stomach turned. He dropped the shard, stepped back. The mirror rattled violently, chains groaning as dust rained from the ceiling. The reflection leaned forward, palm flattening hard against the glass. Its lips stopped moving. It mouthed one word, slow and deliberate. Now. The cracks screamed apart, and with a final shudder, the mirror shattered outward, exploding into the room. Marshall threw his arms up, shards raining around him like falling stars. When he lowered them, coughing dust, the chair wasn't empty. Anymore, the other Marshall sat there, head bowed, hands folded around a microphone. He raised it slowly, chin lifting until his eyes locked on Marshall's. Same face, same eyes, but colder, certain, like he had already won. Marshall's phone vibrated again. He fumbled it out, glanced at the screen. The message burned. Only one leaves. The double rose from the chair, steps echoing too loud on the basement floor. Every movement matched his own heartbeat, sinking tighter with every step until Marshall felt he was moving even when he stood still. The double circled him, microphone scraping against its palm. "You don't get to decide," it said finally, voice cutting the silence, amplified from nowhere. "You already wrote this." Marshall's throat locked. "That's my life." The double shook its head. "No, it's the line you forgot." The basement lights flickered back alive, harsh white tubes buzzing overhead. For a second, Marshall swore he stood on stage, the roar of a crowd bleeding in from nowhere. Then it cut out again, silence hammering him back into the damp dark. The double was inches away now, breath on his face, smirk ready. It lifted the mic and whispered one last thing. Encore. The bulb above them burst. The basement went black. The blackness after the bulb burst felt permanent. The kind of dark that wasn't the absence of light, but the presence of something else. Marshall stood frozen, lungs working like pistons, ears straining for a sound that would tell him where the double had gone. The scrape of metal broke the silence. The folding chair dragged across the concrete, its legs screeching as if someone unseen had shoved it aside. Then the double's voice slithered through the dark, amplified without a speaker, sharp and steady. "You never escaped, Marshall. You just traded walls." A flicker of white bled from the mirror shards scattered on the floor. Each shard glowed faintly, showing fragments of his reflection, but the faces in them weren't all his. One shard showed him younger, still hungry and reckless. Another showed him older, hollowed out and silent. Others showed versions he didn't recognize at all, men with different lives, different choices, all sharing his skin. He bent and picked one up. In its reflection, he was smiling, a kind of calm smile he knew he'd never worn. His stomach twisted. The shard pulsed warm, and in the faint glass he saw the double standing behind him. Closer than breath, Marshall spun. Nothing, just shadows stretching too long. He clenched his fist, the shard cutting into his palm, blood streaking across the reflection. The other him smiled wider in the glass, savoring it. The air thickened. His phone buzzed in his pocket, vibrating like a heart out of time. He yanked it free. The screen glowed red, words etching themselves in frantic strokes. Step in, replace, or be replaced. He dropped the phone. It cracked against the floor, the message frozen across its broken screen. The double finally stepped into view, striding out of the corner shadows, mic in hand, face identical, movements certain. Marshall's voice found him at last, raw and shredded. "This is my stage, my story." The double tilted its head. "Not anymore. You gave it away the second you looked into the glass. The basement groaned, concrete trembling underfoot. The broken shards on the ground hummed like speakers warming up. Every reflection in them turned their eyes toward him. Hundreds of marshals, waiting. Some eager, some afraid, some furious. The double raised the microphone. Final verse, it said. Only one voice stays. Marshall's pulse slammed against his ribs. He looked down at the shard bleeding in his hand, then back at the figure that wore his face. He thought of every night on stage, every bar carved out of pain, every battle where he clawed his way up with nothing but words. And he did the only thing he could. He lifted his own voice. The words poured out raw, unplanned, a verse born in the moment, jagged and alive. The basement vibrated with the sound. The shards around him lit brighter, feeding on the rhythm. His double answered, spitting back bars, with impossible precision, twisting his own life into daggers. The air cracked between them, two flows colliding, rhyme against rhyme, fury against fury. The mirror chains rattled. The cracked glass above them glowed white-hot. The reflections in the shards screamed silently. Marshall took a step forward. Verses pounding from his chest like fists, each line tearing the dark apart. The double matched him step for step, their words overlapping until the room couldn't contain them. And then silence. The lights cut out. The echoes died. When the faint glow returned, only one Marshall stood in the basement. His hoodie hung heavy with sweat. His chest heaved. His fists trembled. The folding chair was empty. The mirror above was gone. The shards at his feet had gone dark. His phone buzzed once on the floor, cracked screen still glowing. The final message burned across it, finale complete. Thank you for performing. He bent to pick it up, but froze. In one shard at his feet, faintly lit again. His reflection smiled late, holding a microphone he wasn't. The reflection leaned forward, lips shaping a single word. Encore. The shard went black.